All right, YouTube, you may not want to hold your breath on this one. The White House administration is saying it might declassify part or the whole 28 missing pages of the 9/11 report. You know, that section that implicates the Saudi Arabians that really should have been released shortly after 9/11 for closure for the families impacted so that people in the public fucking know the truth. We know there was deeper financing behind 9/11 than just, oh yeah, Osama got bored. He decided to take down a couple of towers using fairly pinpoint maneuvers, along with trying to take out apparently the White House at the time, hit the Pentagon. Yeah, that was planned and coordinated from a cave in Pakistan. I'm sure that this makes sense. The intelligence community was counting on the unintelligent aspect of much of the American public at the time, shell-shocked as they were by the attacks, to just gobble up the official story. Social media was almost non-existent at the time. Essentially, in 2001, you didn't have the kind of apparatus online necessary to actually keep politicians accountable. It was really almost the Stone Age. I can remember it fairly well myself. It was all on TV. You know, people were tuned into CNN to watch, Operation Shock and Awe in Iraq. That was a couple years later. 9/11, it's like, literally Stone Age compared to now. Much of the popular varieties of music wasn't around. You know, Eminem was still barely peaking there. You know, you had all of these you had a public that was relaxed and calm from the fall of the Soviet Union, didn't really read into it too much, and you didn't really have an internet there at the time that was expansive enough for people to spread their theories, talk about how there was obvious dishonesty going on. So I'm not going to hold my breath that the White House is going to declassify all 28 missing pages. At most, my expectation is they declassify a couple pages of it. They say, oh, well, we vetted this material. It'll take us years to vet the rest. It's 28 fucking pages long, and Obama hasn't even fucking read it. So it's obvious that he's not particularly concerned about it. You saw Obama right now is doing a bit of a damage control tour in the world, because even though his domestic policies have become a little bit more popular because the economy, the private market, is improving. Private market insofar as the United States even has one these days. That's struggling along and beginning to grow sluggishly, but grow. And so he's getting a pass on the economy and so forth. Getting a pass on the NSA, which he shouldn't, getting a pass on militarized police, which he shouldn't, but whatever. As far as foreign policy goes, though, that's really his weakness right now, and that's really feeding the Republicans during the election. You look at what Donald Trump talks about 80% of the time, it's something to do with the borders or foreign policy. It's not domestic policy other than get rid of Common Core, which everybody else is talking about doing other than Hillary, basically. You know, Sanders is like, throw more money at the problem. The Republicans are like, give it back to the states or the municipalities or whatever. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why foreign policy is more than half of the current election talk going on. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why Trump has said, fuck, I don't care about gay marriage. I don't care about Bruce Jenner in the bathroom or whatever. There's a reason for that. Obama is apologizing to the Saudis, basically shoving his head up his ass in a deep bow to the Saudi royals, saying, oh, please don't divest in our economy, as though there's any fucking risk of them doing that. You think the Saudi Arabians are going to ruin their own economy by getting rid of their, 700 billion or so of U.S. investments? Of course fucking not. They're not going to get rid of any of their investments. They'll divest in a hotel or a mine here and there just to hit the point home and say, oh, well, we can do it. Don't push us too far. At the end of the day, they'll negotiate their way through it somewhere else. They're not going to do that because they make a lot of money investing in the United States. The Chinese too. When foreign companies or foreign states or foreign whatever invest in the United States, when the Chinese buy up 10,000 acres of land, build a solar farm here, a wind turbine field there, a hotel here, and so forth, Americans tend to get really antsy and say, oh, the Chinese are so rich, they're taking over. What you don't understand is that the only reason they're generating wealth is they can't invest in their own economy. It's centrally controlled. A lot of their economy is either it's directly funded by the government, in which case the private market can't compete, Or in the private marketplace, it's subject to a whole bunch of regulatory problems, even in China, yes. And they just don't feel comfortable. They take all their extra money that they've made from Chinese investments or investing in Vietnam or India or something like that, and then they buy stuff here in the United States. Maybe they hope to immigrate someday. That's actually a show of strength of the U.S. economy. The Japanese did it before their bubble burst, and you see their economy for the last 20 years has been fucked. They did the same thing. People in the 80s were worried about the Japanese taking over the United States and owning us. It never happened. They're screwed. The Japanese investing class that did buy up something here in the United States is fine. So as far as the 28 pages go, I don't think there's that great a threat of the Saudis actually doing that, because I don't think they have a great deal of hope in their own economy, which is based entirely on oil. I mean, these people would be screwy if they actually did that. So I think Obama is going to go half-assed here. He'll try to satisfy the domestic population by releasing a few meaningless pages that don't actually implicate anyone. And at the same time, he'll give the Saudis a little payout and say, I'm just, why do you think he's in Saudi Arabia? He's probably over there trying to convince them, don't worry, I'm not actually going to release the pages that will allow the U.S. public to call for genocide against your people, for utter and utmost treason and religious warfare, and being responsible for every fucking terrorist attack in the last 30 or 40 years. Don't worry, I won't actually get the Trump might, but I won't get anybody riled up. We're doing the best we can, but I've got to pacify my population. I don't think he's going to release all 28 pages. I don't think so. I think he's doing this as a bit of a distraction because there have been increasing calls to release it. So if he simply says, well, yeah, I've released all I can, the rest is top secret, it will endanger, it's not actually going to endanger any U.S. lives. It's not actually going to endanger our relations with Saudi Arabia. But he will claim that, and he can pacify at least those that approve of him or kind of approve of him in the U.S. population. The 9/11 families, they'll be pissed. They'll know that it's dishonest. They'll know what's fucking going on. And the hardcore Republicans, they'll call for blood. The rest of them, they really won't care. Enough years have passed since 9/11 that it's not quite as visceral as it once was. I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need to hold the Saudis accountable for being the ones who bankrolled Osama in the first place. What we should have done is run bombing raids over Riyadh. We shouldn't have gone after the Iraqis. We shouldn't have bothered in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was essentially just a field commander for the Saudis to conduct foreign strikes. That's essentially all fucking Osama was. He didn't get kicked out of it. They make a big deal about, we kicked Osama out because we disagreed with him. Then why are you bankrolling all these other fucking jihadist groups? ISIS is at the ISIS hasn't attacked the Saudi Arabians. They called for the destruction of Mecca because it was idolatrous. Have they actually done anything like that? That's funny. Last I checked, they were too busy killing random European civilians. I wonder why. There's no willpower or reason in Obama to want to release any of this report. He probably doesn't want to release so much as an unredacted sentence of this report. But circumstances are now forcing him to release at least a little bit to get the Rand Pauls and the Donald Trumps off his back, to get, I think it's Bob Graham's stuff off his back, to get the Saudis off his back at the same time, because then he can make a big show about, finally, the 9/11 families have closure, without actually giving them closure, without actually implicating his buddies over in oil-rich Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, he can go over and assure the Saudis, hey, I'm being forced to do this. Don't worry. You'll be all right. I'm not going to release anything that's going to be too perturbing. And don't worry, I'll veto the 9/11 bill. Because, for some reason, Obama has successfully convinced some of his fans that magically the ability of U.S. citizens to sue a foreign state for something that every fucking state on earth agrees is a problem is akin to opening up U.S. citizens to be sued by foreign entities for meaningless laws, moral laws that are only laws in one or two countries. Somehow, he believes that this would become some sort of international problem, some international crisis. Everyone would suddenly be suing one another. That already happens. There's no similar law in Europe, and yet the German courts are allowing certain Germans to get sued by the Turks, which I find funny. They don't even have such a thing enshrined. Their courts just decided to unilaterally allow it. So, the problem is already arising in Europe without some sort of 9/11 bill. This is strictly about allowing U.S. citizens who have been impacted by 9/11, because we know the Saudi Arabians were involved. The people who've read the report have already fucking said that. It's in the 28 pages. We already know that. We just don't have Obama being honest enough to release it. It allows them to get compensation from the Saudi government. And why shouldn't they? We give the Saudi Arabians billions in weapons. We give them tens of millions in direct cash aid, which, technically, like Israel, because the Saudi Arabians have a fast-tracked nuclear capability agreement with Pakistan, we are bound and obligated not to give them a single bit of aid, including military aid. We can't deal with a rogue nuclear state. They don't disclose their nuclear capabilities. They might already have nuclear weapons. They're not disclosing them. They have them hidden out in the sand dunes somewhere. The same is true of good buddy, greatest ally, matzo ball land Israel. Supposedly our greatest allies, and yet one state wants to hardball us anytime we say, we should, come to the bargaining table so we can finally get shit, sewn up in the Levant region. And the other one basically bankrolls the 9/11 terrorists, or at least threw money at Osama, and then, magically, somehow they didn't know what Osama bin Laden was doing. Okay, let's assume that's the case. Let's assume they funneled money to Osama thinking he was going to use it to, attack the Russians or something, or expand Taliban control into a neighboring state. Let's assume that was the case. And then the money got used, and the Saudis honestly didn't know it was going to be used for this, for 9/11. Let's assume that that's the case. Does this really negate the fact that 9/11 fucking happened in the first place? And for Obama to sit there and say, well, this is going to be an international problem with the Saudi Arabians, I try to think that most Americans don't really give a fuck what the Saudi government wants. Now, the Saudi Arabians can pretend to be our ally. Now, let's differentiate here. If a group of terrorists in France, or the UK, or Japan, one of our close allies, were to conduct a strike here, that government would immediately condemn it. They would come down like a ton of bricks on top of that group and wipe them out of existence overnight. They'd have no problem with us helping them do that. There would be apologies by the millions. People would be strewing flowers in the street talking about, we are sorry for what these other citizens have done. And if a group of Americans were to do that to one of our close allies, it would be the same here. People would be crying on TV. But in Saudi Arabia, not a single tear is shed. They like the fact that we were attacked. They're just worried that the people here in the United States will find out, oh, they also bankrolled it, and that's why they weren't acting too surprised thereafter. And when we find out, of course, greatest ally knew that the attack was incoming and said nothing. Now, that doesn't excuse Clinton, who knew about these problems in our intelligence community years before it happened. I'm not excusing the Clintons whatsoever, but there was foreign intelligence that something was brewing, and it doesn't appear to have been shared with our intelligence agencies. Now their answer is, oh, give more money to the NSA to spy on American citizens. Well, Osama supposedly coordinated this from a fucking cave somewhere in the Afghan-Pakistan border. He didn't coordinate it from New York City. He didn't coordinate it from Boston or Houston or Salt Lake City or the middle of Pierre. He coordinated it from half a world away. That's really where the threat is. You look at these attacks, most of the terrorism that happens still happens in the Middle East. The only place it crops up in any significant number, places like Europe with no border control. Places that take millions of Islamic refugees without even vetting them. I am much more concerned about that than I am really going into the Middle East to solve problems. Bush tried to do that. It failed. We made Iraq worse. That was our fault, by the way. We fucked up Iraq. We completely fucked up. We should have left Saddam in charge. Gaddafi. Libya's a shithole now. We should have left Gaddafi in power. I don't care if he wants to start some gold-backed North African currency union. Why the hell should I fucking care? Okay, oranges cost 2 cents more per ton. Whoop-de-doo. A small price to pay for not having millions of militants rising up in North Africa. We should have paid Gaddafi a bounty per terrorist that he killed. We should have paid Saddam. We should have said, Saddam, we may not be great buddies, but here, we'll give you $10 for every jihadist that your troops kill. Scalp them. Sell us their scalps, and we'll put them up on pikes around the World Trade Center's ruins. We should have done that. It'd be better than rebuilding the tower. We should just have Osama's head on a little pile in the middle, surrounded by the scalps of all of his men. Let Gaddafi and Saddam and all these others do some work for us and pay them. We can pay them royally. Our currency's worth so much more. I don't care if it's like this gold-backed yuan bullshit. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to work. They'll cripple their currency in order to replace ours as the reserve currency, even though nobody wants to use Chinese currency, except for China's neighbors. That's a great idea. When BRICS is collapsing, Brazil's voting, Dilma's gone from Brazil, basically. South Africa's got continual fucking problems. China's on the ropes as far as their growth goes. Russia's in a recession. And India is sort of leaning to the Western world. Yeah, BRICS is going to be stable. I'm sure it'll still be there in a decade. No, it won't. All these Chinese projects are going to fail. The Guatemala Canal and so forth. They're all doomed. They're never going to happen. China will be fucked. As far as 9/11 goes, though, it's time to bring some level of closure here. These 28 pages have been a problem for years. And there are increasing numbers of people aware that there were, a lot of people weren't even aware for a long time. They didn't care. They weren't even aware that there were sections of the 9/11 report that had been heavily redacted or censored outright. They weren't aware of it. And they didn't really care. They thought the government's official story was fine. They saw no problem with the idea that some unshaved caveman out living in the caves of Pakistan managed to coordinate one of the largest militant strikes in all of mankind's history. They saw nothing strange about this fact. He didn't get funding from anyone. I guess he got funded by a bunch of destitute opium growers in Afghanistan. I don't fucking think so. It took many millions of dollars to do what he did. It was the Saudi Arabians. They deserve to be held to account. We've given them enough freebies for long enough. They're not even really our ally. They're the source of most of the terrorism in the Middle East. Most of the militants branching out from the Middle East into parts of North Africa, South Asia, certainly Europe. That's all Saudi Arabia's fault primarily. It's time to let them get sued. It's not going to open us up to frivolous lawsuits because the U.S. government will just shoot them down. Let them take responsibility. If there's a diplomatic incident, tell them you can either pay up or we're fucking going to buy our oil from the Venezuelans or something. The Venezuelans would love to sell their oil for a few dollars more per barrel. I'm sure because of their breadline problem. They don't even have bread in their bread lines. They have moths floating around. That's what people are eating there. They're eating dried up old dead bugs. That's all they fucking have to eat. That and dirt. Clay cakes like the Haitians eat. Okay, let's do business with them. They're closer anyway, and they're not a bunch of fucking jihadists. So that's what I have to say about the 9/11 report, the 28 missing pages. Yeah, I don't expect Obama to release them. I'll probably release like 10 pages or maybe 20 pages. He'll redact the little section that says, oh yeah, the Saudi royal family itself gave Osama the money to conduct the attacks and say, hey, go out and have a great time. That's probably what happened. That's about all. Peace out.